In today's episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the 1986 film Manhunter. Let's dive right into Manhunter. I didn't know what to expect heading into this movie. I am not caught up to date on the Hannibal Lecter movies. I think that's Silence of the Lambs. If not, then I'm sure I'll be crucified down below in the comments. But I know this is somewhat of a cult classic movie, and I know this movie features Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter, but he's not the same actor as the acclaimed Hannibal Lecter is. And I know this movie is also based off the novel Red Dragon, which was readapted later on, I believe. And I don't know, I thought this movie was just pretty mid in my opinion, not really good, not really bad, kind of just a middling movie. Very sort of 80s feel to it with that like weird music going on, and then the plot kind of just runs away from you at the end, where to me the beginning half of this movie was a lot stronger than the latter half of the movie, with this idea of this sort of killer being unattainable and no one knows who he is. Sort of an interesting, like, kind of guess who. That was the thrilling part to me, but then once we know who he is, and he's this kind of weird guy who is, I won't spoil. We'll do a little spoiler-free section, but it felt like first half was good. Like that's the crime thriller we're really looking for in this sort of 80s movies. Who's this bad guy? And he's doing all these crazy things, and he's collecting these bodies. And who is he? What's going on? And then it kind of just like, oh, this is who that was. Okay, and the crimes are brutal. And another thing I didn't really like was the main character, William Peterson. I know we're meant to be, super in love with him and he can do no wrong. And I think other people who've watched this movie like the main character. But I thought he was, man, I didn't really vibe with him. And I've also seen another one of his movies, done a review for it, To Live and Die in LA. I think maybe it's just him, William Peterson, as an actor is not somebody I'm willing to follow into the depths of war. I feel like he doesn't act that inspired to me, and maybe there's just something about the way I'm disconnecting there. But that was another piece of it where I was like, what do I really care about this guy? And yeah, the ending ridiculous, but it's the 80s, so you gotta sort of give him a pass for that. And yeah, I thought this overall was just a middling movie. Now let's get into my thoughts and reactions, and then I'll reveal my score at the end. So, as you know on the DubCast, we always like to talk about the beginning of the movie. This introduction to this movie was very odd, where it's just a camera or something of a first person point of view focused on a girl who wakes up and sees this thing, and that's the beginning of the movie. It's like, what's going on here? I think this was. There will be spoilers from here now, by the way. I think this was the killer, and when he's in their house doing his thing, the first house that they have to investigate, that was him in the house. But it's like, okay, like it's meant to be this scary thing, like, oh shit, it's like this monster guy. But the guy's not that scary too. Like that when we get the reveal of who the guy actually is, he's not even that scary. He's just an oddball sort of guy. But that introduction I think was fine in the moment, but looking back on it, it doesn't make much sense with how the movie progresses, in my opinion. But I feel like I end up saying that in a lot of the reviews. So another intro, it is what it is. Moving on, we meet our main character, the character played by William Peterson. I believe his name is Graham. He has a very nice house, and I have to say, this is something that I griped with him on as well. Bro's living in like Miami beachfront property, and he's got a wife and a kid. His son, I respect. My favorite thing about him was that he was protecting the turtle eggs in the beach, and it's a huge problem of when turtles go to lay their eggs in the beach, only like 10% of them even hatch, whatever, and animals come and get them. So I respect him building the sort of shelter for the turtles, making sure no one can come and get those eggs and make sure they can live a good life. But it's that classic dilemma of one last job. Will you please step up after retiring and going to do one more thing. And maybe that hurts my perspective of the movie, where I have not seen this character do anything, so I don't really care if he's going to do one last rodeo or not. And I feel like that's sort of a weak plot point to use in movies, in my opinion, where it's like one last ride, but when you don't even know the person, you don't even know what he's done. What's the ride been? What does the one more ride mean when you don't really care about what the previous rides had been? If that makes sense. He gets approached about this serial killer, and he's gonna be the one to be like this masterminded detective, I guess, to figure it out. They really need him because they're going to him on retirement. So of course he talks to his wife, and she's like, sleep on it, and he's like, I'm going no matter what. He basically already starts working on it. Another interesting, or one of the more interesting plot points or side stories, in my opinion, is this sort of arc with this media guy, this media reporter who is sort of back and forth, one of those Nightcrawler type guys, that movie Nightcrawler, where he's like going to try and find the biggest scoop at the last minute. He's kind of a scumbag, doesn't care about other people, but is clearly an enemy of Graham in this movie, or they've have some sort of tepid history. He slams him into a car after an interaction, which that's just your average crash out. That's our main character. He's a good guy, right? I don't know. I thought that was very funny. Of just like that's our introduction to the guys. He just gets slammed into a car, and I guess 1986, more things would fly than 2025, but that feels very off-putting. But he's able to use this reporter as rage bait for the killer, because once the killer makes another kill, they're like, all right, we got to draw him out. They try and get him on being being gay, where it's like they're calling him gay. He might have homo sexual interests in some of his male victims, and that kind of draws him out of the woodwork to be like angry and shit. And while they do this whole ploy of Graham doing a sting operation to get him to try and interact with Graham walking in like the middle of the city, which was bad, seemed like a setup all the way through. The killer is smarter than that and goes for the reporter instead. So then the reporter is taken under capture while the act with Graham one goes a puts. What do you know? A sting operation goes a puts. I feel like every movie, every TV show, a TV show I just watched that happened. If you know, you know. I don't want to spoil that TV show by saying it, but it came out in fall of 2025. Anyways, he is captured, the reporter, and we finally meet our killer, our really scary killer, who is like this first person point of view to start off the movie. It's just this weird tall guy with pantyhose on his head, and it's like this guy's more of an oddball than a creep, where you don't really get the I don't understand his motivations for killing people. It's very odd where he just kills families and he's like, I'm gonna take this reporter and we're gonna send him a message, and he shows the reporter compilations of the families he's killed. He's got pictures. I think the motivation was the girl. He was interested in this woman, where they learn that he had these like setups to basically stalk them. So I think it was the woman in the family, like these middle-aged or like younger woman who he finds attracted to but can never have type of thing, but he probably never made an effort. Typical serial killer stuff. So I take back what I said about him not having a motivation, but still, this guy's a very weird person with wearing those like women's socks. I think they're called pantyhose. If they're not, don't kill me. On his head, and then just playing a compilation of all the families he's killed for the reporter. And you think for a second he might spare the reporter, where he sends him, you're gonna record this, and then I'm gonna let you go type thing. But no, he sends him on fire down a ramp, and he reveals the address of Graham, where there's another side plot where Hannibal Lecter's in prison and Graham has like this working relationship with him to go and ask him about like, what do you think the serial killer would do? Turns out Hannibal Lecter was in on it and was just like basically DMing the guy, this new serial killer, at all about Graham and where he lives and stuff through a book. And I don't know, that was kind of like a weird side plot where I feel like they kind of just used the name Hannibal Lecter to throw into this movie to like draw interest into it. But I don't even know if that makes sense, because I think the Hannibal Lecter stuff comes after this. Anyways, Hannibal Lecter plays like a small part in this movie. I don't even think I talked about him in this review. Moving on. So the reporter is dead, and I have to note that someone mentions retiring and going to Montana. This is Graham, I believe. Why does everyone want to go to Montana in the United States? I feel like in like 3 to 5 movies I've watched where it's like, oh, we're gonna retire and go to Montana. I think it was like The Hunt for Red October, or the Russian guys like, I want to go to Montana, or in I forget where he's trying to go in Inglourious Basterds, but they're always trying to go to Montana. What's in Montana that's so nice? Like it's just like living on a farm and not having anyone to talk to. You do like skiing. Is that your thing? I don't know. I feel like that's a very weird destination for this to keep coming up in movies. Nonetheless, I digress. Montana would be nice to go visit one day. Anyways, he's got too much love for the game, though. Graham ain't going to frickin' Montana. We know that. The movie still has like half an hour left. He's not gonna frickin' retire now and go to Montana. Spending a lot more time with the killer in this latter half of the movie, and he sort of gets in love with this woman from work, and we find out that he works like developing photos. Sleep together. I didn't I didn't know for like the first half of this arc that the woman is blind. Where this kind of takes a lot of momentum out of the movie too, where it's like him just like interacting with the blind woman for like 10 to 15 minutes in the third act, where it's like, okay, it's interesting, but not really. It's like I don't really care about this blind woman and his love interest, when I guess it's more like a sense of, oh, he might do the thing where he kills them. Like you're supposed to be a little bit scared on that end rather than being like, what is going on here? But I wasn't really scared. It's like he's not gonna kill this woman if he loves her. He is now in love with this woman, stalks her because he's been stalking the woman in the past, and he stalks her being driven home, which, by the way, the whole origin of him meeting or taking that woman home was this other guy said he couldn't drive her home that day. Like, he helps her out a lot because she's blind. She can't freaking drive and get her own way. So when he sees him, that guy who drives her home every day, drive her home every day, he gets like crazy and kills the guy. And thinking that they were kissing, he's on some delusional shit. I was ready for him to be done and ready to be cooked. I mean, this guy is just a creepy weirdo, and not even in like a scary way, where I think the movie kind of struggles with trying to make him scary, make him creepy. He was just creepy, in my opinion. Of course, he takes her to his house, and they finally are able to track him down through a tip where it didn't seem like there was a lot of really great detective work done throughout the movie by Graham. It's more of just like him as like a character developing rather than like him doing actual work. It's like, oh, this is why we care about him because he's got these like interesting rivalries with the media. Like, what were the actual tangible tips he got? I don't. It's slipping my mind, but they got like something in order to. They got something from the place he worked, and they narrowed it down to him, and that scene was cool of them like going back and forth through channels to like figure out who this guy was. A little bit of police stuff. I always like the police stuff going on, but they find him, and of course they're like, we're gonna surround the house, and then we'll take him. Graham's like, fuck that, I'm just running in blind because it's 1986 and we have a movie to make. So of course he goes in. These action scenes made me laugh, and I've been a little bit critical of past movies like pre 2000s of action scenes, and this fits right up into it. And to my opinion, just hams it up. Takes 5 to 6 shots from a pistol to get the killer down, but of course Graham does it, and voila, we got the killer, guys. All I have to say is at least some of the turtles made it, and he gets to go home with his kid. His kid seemed like a good kid, and the wife seemed like a good wife. So go back and live your life. We don't need you to solve these serial killers when you're just wasting our time for an hour and a half. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I thought this movie was like somewhat entertaining. It just kind of fell off for me a bit at the end, and there was just like too much 80s cheesiness thrown in there for me. So I'm gonna give this a middling score of a 6.7. Not the worst movie in the world. It just was a movie that I watched and didn't, it passed the time. It wasn't a terrible watch where I was like, let me turn this off. It was interesting for parts of it, and there were parts that I liked, but there were parts that I was like, all right, what are we doing here? So where does this movie review or rank with the other movies we've reviewed so far on the channel? This is the 91st movie we reviewed, and this comes in at number 74. This ties Good Morning Vietnam, Blade Runner, and Master and Commander Far Side of the World. I would take this movie over Master and Commander Far Side of the World slightly, but would lose out to Good Morning Vietnam and Blade Runner slightly, all obviously 6.7s. So that's where this falls in the 6.7 range. Comparing this to some other similar stuff we got going on, To Live and Die in LA, which is 6.8. I mentioned that movie earlier. Both of those movies, William Peterson. So William Peterson not off to a good start on the channel, 6.8 and 6.7 in his two movies so far. This loses out to Born Identity, which I gave a 7.4. Brian Cox is in Born Identity, which I don't really remember him in Born Identity, but we got two Brian Cox movies down. This loses out to Snatch, which is a 7.5. Dennis Farina in both of those movies. Loses out to Hostile as a 7.4. Stephen Lang in both of those movies. And this is the lowest crime thriller so far, falling behind Training Day, which was a 9.1, The Guilty, which is a 7.7, and Good Time, which was a 7.6. So number four of number four on the crime thrillers there. So yeah, that's a review on Manhunter. What'd you guys think? I know this is some sort of a cult classic, so let me know down below if you're part of that cult and if you really like it, or you kind of just thought like it was mid like I did. That's where we'll leave it on Manhunter. Next movie review will be Knight of Cups, and then after that, expect more movie reviews in the future and TV stuff we're doing on short-term social media content. So stay tuned on TikTok, Instagram, and yeah, sports stuff is happening as well. UFC numbered events will be covered by hopefully me and my guest Shane. NFL season has winded down, but we're gearing back up for some basketball, March Madness, and NBA. And then finally, we've been doing some off the deep end with Dub. So those are the episode numbers that don't have a title. Just get into some random conversations with some friends. So hope you guys have a great day and make sure to like, subscribe, comment, dislike. Don't unsubscribe. That's the one thing you can't do. Okay, if you subscribe, do not unsubscribe. So I'll leave y'all with that. And as always, be easy, y'all.